All right, welcome everybody. It is September 9th, 2021, and this is the Subcommittee on Waste Reduction, the Sustainability Commission here in Palm Springs. And present, we have Patrick Tellerico and Tracy Sheldon from the City of Palm Springs. We have folks from Palm Springs Disposal Services, Chris and Liz. And then we have our commission members, Roy Clark and Dawn Barrett. And we will let Jake in if he joins us a little bit later. And we have our visiting former commission member, Robert McCann, is joining us as well. So welcome everybody. And I'll keep an eye on the room to see if anybody else joins us. So wanted to go through a few updates on our call today. Let me just pull up our agenda. All right, so anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda? All right. So we wanted to update you on a couple of big items. So one is the disposal of foodware and plastics waste reduction ordinance status. So as y'all know, the council passed that ordinance in July. We have recently issued a request for proposal from consultants to assist us with the implementation of that ordinance. We have received some responses and we are going to evaluate those responses and probably make a selection next week. So we hope to have somebody on board to help us implement that in the next few weeks. So by the end of the month, we're hoping to have that person or people on board. Pretty excited about having access to that resource because as we're seeing each one of these restaurants and food vendors is an individual case and needs their own individual attention. So we're looking forward to having somebody on board who can reach out to them and do follow-up, do research, et cetera. So we look forward to having them on board. Included in the scope of work for that person or people are things like conducting direct outreach with businesses, providing them with technical assistance. If they need research done on alternative products, they can do that. If they need analyses done on foodware, reusable foodware options, then they can do that. They can also help us with messaging and outreach and communication to not only businesses, but also the public. So pretty broad scope of work. We also included in that assistance with SB 1383 implementation. So it also covers potentially food waste questions. So I think most of the people that responded have some skill in both of those areas. So again, we look forward to having that resource available to us as we go forward. We have completed a fact sheet for the ordinance. And actually, let me try to pull that up, show it to you guys, send it around afterwards. That one. Sorry. So this is the.
I just created a folder yesterday, and I think I named it Foodware.
Okay.
Fact sheet in the SB 1383. There it is.
Okay. Yeah, I found it in my email. So I think this is the final proof. So I don't think it changed after this. But this just gives you an example of what we're pulling together for the restaurants. So having stuff very clearly stated that this is what you do by January 1st, 2022. So reusables for on-site dining, condiments, any reusable packaging. And then provide accessories only when wanted. It's the other big one. And then stop using certain things. So the plastic bags and the polystyrene and the plastic straws and stirs. So hopefully that'll be clear for folks. And then on the back is the January 1st, 2023 information. So only fiber-based disposable foodware and accessories. And also information about our assistance that we can provide, and information about exemptions if they feel like they are entitled to one. So we're and Tracy, have we sent this out yet? I don't know that we've sent it out yet. We're creating
not this actual document yet.
Okay, so we're about to send this out to restaurants and food vendors. We're trying to make a second document for them that also talks about food waste requirements and recycling requirements. So it'll have everything kind of on one page: foodware, food waste, all the things that they have to comply with here in the next couple of years. So that is our plan for that. Go back. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, well, we're going to keep moving forward with that. Our next big step with that is to coordinate with the chamber. And we are planning on hosting an event for restaurants and food vendors to introduce them to the ordinance and kind of get them moving in the right direction. We've already had several phone calls and a few emails from people asking what they need to do to comply. So at least the word is getting out there. So that's it on that front. 1383 planning update. And so Don, I don't know how familiar you are with 1383, but 1383 is a new state law that goes into effect January 1st of 2022 that basically requires us to start collecting food waste from residential properties, food waste and organic waste from residential properties, both multifamily and single family. So we've been hard at work trying to update our franchise agreement with Palm Springs Disposal Services and get equipment in place and get policies and ordinances in place to ensure that we are in compliance with that law. So essentially, we have been meeting with PSDS pretty much weekly for the last few months to go through the franchise agreement and update that material. And so we're getting close to having a draft to work from. We've kind of addressed a lot of the scope issues that we have and tried to kind of lay out various, oh, Jake's here. And to lay out various operating procedures in terms of how things are going to be collected, how we're going to monitor compliance, and how we're going to enforce. So anyway, so there's a lot going on that front, and we're going to continue to do work. We've got meetings scheduled with council throughout the rest of the year to talk about the franchise agreement update, to talk about new rates, and to talk about the ordinance that we have to develop. So our agenda with council is pretty full for the rest of the year, based in large part on the materials that come through this particular effort. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I did not know I didn't know what the number was. I knew about the issue, but I didn't know about the number, the number, the 1383. Did I hear you say multifamily in the beginning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's one of the challenges that we have, is how to service all of those different types of multifamily dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
And we heard your message last time about the mobile home parks as well. So making sure that we take those into consideration too. Sort of like the disposable foodware issue, this is a very individualized sort of conversation with a lot of these different types of multifamily units.
Mhm.
Everybody has a little bit different system and different little procedures and different space capabilities and things like that. So we are actually hosting a meeting on September 23rd with HOAs and multifamilies clients that PSTS provided us with contact information for. So we sent out a letter to all of them. Gosh, I think it was 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, or something like that. And we hope to engage them in a conversation around the changes that we expect that they will experience on the multifamily front. So,
Okay, and like mobile home parks aren't HOAs.
Right.
And they're included in that though in some way?
yes, yep. So they should have also gotten a letter. And in fact, I think we got a note back from the Sahara mobile home park. So they did get a letter, so they are on that list.
Yeah, Sahara is one of the most responsible. I know of, if it's of any help at any point in the future, I know something about many of the other mobile home parks, not all of them, but
Okay.
feel free
Great.
to check.
And where is Sahara, by the way? Do you know?
Sahara is the one that's behind the Ace Hotel.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
And they have the large new one next to them, renewed one next to them, Palm View or something like that. The tiny homes. Hopefully
Yeah.
they're cooperating.
Yep. So I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have with regard to multifamily is going to be space issues, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a lot of folks that don't have very big trash bins or bins, or enclosures for their trash bins, so they don't have a lot of extra space. So those are the kinds of things that we hope to talk about on the call, because unfortunately, that may not get them an exemption under this law. The state has been pretty clear that they are reserving those space exemptions for people that really have no space. And so we're going to have to all think creatively about how we address kind of some of those space issues for a lot of those locations.
Space at the collection point in the residency, or space in the home itself?
It's both, actually. So in a lot of the properties, they don't have a very big trash enclosure, and so we have to figure out what to do with those. But
Yeah, we don't in mine.
Yeah, but there's also places that don't have a lot of space for individual units to store things, right? So we have to think about that too. And PSCS is working hard on thinking through those scenarios. And so, Chris, one thing that I'd like to do in that presentation on the 23rd is kind of run through a few of those scenarios that we anticipate and what that might look like for them. So anyway, so that's, I'd like to make sure that we've got that info ready to go.
Sure, we might as well talk about a few examples, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Bring up a few of the
exactly.
places, and if they're listening, they can contribute, but yeah, I would definitely bring up those different examples, just so they know that we'll need to provide some options.
Right. Jake, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi. Sorry I was late, first of all. I was having connectivity issues. But one thing I was going to mention, or not, but however, one thing I was going to mention, and like where I've done a lot of waste reduction work, is that it also, when we start thinking about the future of containers needed for collection, I mean, obviously we have really big sort of rubbish bins today, but that's largely because there's, mixed materials in there, not future resources. And so therefore there's always a reprioritization of the space that's already dedicated for this, because it's not like anything that's ending up in these areas in the collection sites. It's different material, it's just being organized differently. So I think there, when we create space around kind of future plan, it's reminding people that, yeah, because I think also using the visual of having a smaller rubbish bin versus a larger recycling bin and a larger collection bin for, our resource recovery around composting, like that's always a really great visual, because then obviously it also gives you the sense of like, well, where do I put it? So I just, if you weren't already thinking about that in terms of planning, I think that's something to also reassure people that it's not about claiming new space. It's more about reappropriating the space that's already dedicated for collection.
Right. Yeah, we've been trying to convey that message when we go out to do some of the site visits that we've been doing, especially for some of the commercial businesses like the hotels and that kind of thing. They've got two big giant dumpsters, but a lot of the one dumpster is full of stuff that could be in a different type of container. So we're trying to encourage them to swap those out and downsize where they can. So, yep. So, and in fact, that would be a good example to share perhaps with them during that meeting on the 23rd, is to maybe have a downsized waste container and a bigger, recycling container or something like that. So that's where we are with that. I think we're generally on schedule right now. I think the main thing that we're struggling with is going to be, of course, equipment lead times. So it's going to take a while for some of the new trucks and some of the new equipment to come in. But we're hoping that as of January 1st, we will be able to at least tell the people that currently have organic service, like their green yard waste container, that they can start putting food waste in there in some form or fashion. So that's our fingers are crossed for that. It depends on whether or not this Eden Hill facility opens that's going to accept that material. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that that's going to be possible. Then the other piece of that is that it was Eden Hill and the other thing I was going to mention to you, Chris, in particular, is we had a meeting of my counterparts in the other cities. Gosh, it was while I was on vacation. And we talked about the desire by Burtec, who is the ultimate processor of all of our green waste and recyclable material, a desire by them to have us bag or have people bag their organic or their food waste. So instead of telling people just throw your food waste into the bin with your green waste, they would like for us to tell them to bag their food waste inside their green bin to keep it somewhat separate. So their intent with that is to try to separate that out when it gets to the destination and to process that material differently than the green waste.
Right.
So
I know that's something that was a big contradictory to what Palm Springs was trying to tell residents, but at the same time, if that helps that facility clean that material up or keep it separate and get the ratios right for composting, they're probably going to stick to that.
Right. So when we were, Burtec was actually on the phone when we were talking, and I don't know that we came up with a conclusion to that conversation. There was strong pushback by some of the other cities that they didn't want to tell people to put, especially to put things into plastic bags, because that's kind of counter to what we tell them about their recycling. So there was some concern about that. There was some talk about giving out like the right kind of bags, even though they're not going to get composted, maybe clear bags or something like that. So there was some talk about what kinds of bags we might recommend, or paper bags or things like that. So anyway, so I think that that conversation is still happening, and I'm not quite sure where it's going to land. Although on the one hand, it does keep materials cleaner if we put them in bags inside the green bin. It also does sort of create a weird messaging thing where we're telling people to put stuff into bags, and when we don't really want them to do that elsewhere. So anyway, so I think that's where we are in that conversation. And again, it's still evolving, and we'll see how things shake out.
Okay, yeah, I think that what we can do is, as we're developing some education and as we're finalizing the scope and know how we're going to educate, what we're going to put on our flyers and reading material, we'll just kind of leave that just till the last minute, because I'm sure we're going to get a last minute decision.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Jake.
Another question. So regarding bags in the containers, so we're discouraging from the green composting bags, obviously, since those break down and likely they wouldn't really be able to be solid by the time they're all combined, but could we use that?
So are you talking about the green plastic, like compostable bags?
Yes.
So the indication that we got from Burtec is that any bag will be broken open and discarded. No bags would be put into the composting process.
And the problem they have with that, just to add to that, is that some stuff is certified, some's not. They can't tell. Some of the stuff doesn't break down in that 90-day process that they need. Some of it breaks down much, much longer. So to go through that and test each one, it's just counterintuitive.
Yeah, that was sort of the gist of our other conversation that we had about the bags, is that, should we be recommending a certain type of bag? And if so, what would that be? And so, but ultimately it came down to the fact that Vertex is going to just break it open and get the stuff out. And they couched it also as a contamination, an opportunity for them to monitor for contamination as well. So not only is it keeping the materials separate, like the green waste separated from the food waste, but it's also an opportunity for them to look inside the bag and see what is actually going into their compost system. So.
Are they open to paper bags?
I think so. They said that those would sort of end up breaking down in the process. So we did throw that out there. And I think they were not opposed to that. That one gets I think it could get a little bit tricky because the bag will get wet potentially and break in the process. So again, I'm not sure how intact they need for that bag to be at the end. So.
And would they be, because it seems like if it's a fiber, then it could potentially serve as a similar type of like yard waste fiber that would then be added as part of the ratios needed for wet to brown waste or material that goes into compost.
Right, I agree. And
So,
that was kind of, yeah, that was presented to them, and they did agree that could happen.
Okay.
And again, I think it just goes to purpose, right? So if their purpose is to really keep that stuff separated and to inspect it before it goes in, then probably some sort of a plastic bag makes more sense. But
Sure.
again, it just, yeah.
And I guess at the end of the day, this is really just a stopgap until we actually have dedicated bins for food waste.
Well, that's a good question.
Will it always be the same collection bin?
Right. I think it's always going to be the same collection bin. And Chris, when we were one of the things we started to talk about, because we have such a variety of different multifamily complexes in particular with different space issues, we did go back to the discussion of, do we want to provide just like 5-gallon or 2-gallon pails for people and then have those manually collected? And so I think we're moving back in that direction again. And so in those cases, Chris, I'm wondering, is that probably just going to be food waste? And in which case, does that get collected and sorted and kept separate in the collection process, or does that just go into the general collection system that would collect the green waste too?
Well, we've got a couple thoughts on that. So it would be just food waste, right? The 2.5-gallon pail, which was what we're talking about, would be food waste only. And it would be collected along with the commercial source separated food waste, right? So we already have that source separated. That would probably go into that. But depending on what Vertec does, if they're going to allow plastic bags, I guess it would just it would depend. If there's a rear loading green waste truck in the area that went through, or an organics truck that had both organics and food waste in it, they may get collected that way.
Right.
But right now, we're looking at it as a source separated material.
Okay. Yeah. So Jake, there could be instances where people would have just an individual food waste container. But again, I think we were thinking that that would be a subset of most folks. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. I say I'm new to this conversation, so I'm not new to the issue. I'm just new to this specific conversation. So I may be asking something out of range, but it would seem that an awful lot of residents generate very little green waste. I know, for example, in my park, people generate green waste maybe once every month or so or less, but they generate food waste every day.
Mhm.
And it would seem that with a lot of our wealthier residents who use landscaping people, do those landscaping people remove their green waste, or does it go out with the person's garbage? So it seems that there would be an awful lot of, volume-wise, not a lot, but more frequently, food waste than other green waste. And so I'm wondering if it complicates the issue when people aren't really generating green waste that often.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So we thought about that in a couple of different ways. One was whether or not, like from a cleanliness perspective, right? If you've got a 3/4 full bin of green waste because your gardener was there and he used your bin, and you threw a little bit of food waste in there, then that sort of is maybe a cleaner bin. It results in a cleaner bin than necessarily a bunch of food waste in bin. So I think I think the way that it will come into play is the size of the container. So people are going to have an option of getting a 32 gallon, a 65, or a 94 or something, so 3 different sizes. And so if I'm a resident and my gardener takes my green waste, then I'm probably just going to want the smallest bin I can get for just my food waste. If you're like me, where my gardener uses my bin, and we're going to encourage people to have that happen. So we're going to encourage people to have their gardener use their bin just so that we are certain where that stuff goes. But if you're like me, they probably fill it about 3/4 full every week. And so again, I would be in a situation where I would keep the largest bin and I would put my food waste on top or something like that. So I think it's going to just depend on what the scenario is, and
Yeah, see, like most of my neighbors generate food waste and very, very seldom generate green waste.
right.
So-
Right. Yeah,
so
we were
same
thinking
with
that's why,
myself.
and that's the other reason why we were thinking that the smaller totes would be better for the smaller, the 2.5 gallon container would be better for multifamily in particular, because they're not going to have the kind of green waste that single family residents generate potentially. And, since more and more people are moving to desert scape landscapes, even if you do have a single house, then you might not be generating a lot of green waste anyway. So,
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, so, and I think that's the important reason why options are going to be available. There's so many different complexes out here. And if you're able to join on this meeting, this webinar that we're having on the 22nd, we'll go over some of those examples, because you'll kind of understand where we're coming from. Some of these condo complexes have full landscape service front and back. They produce no green waste whatsoever. So yeah, for places like that, why have a 32, 60, 65, or 96? It probably needs to be a pail. So there's different examples like that all over, and space issues is the other. So there's just a lot of different examples.
Okay.
Chris,
Yes.
I have
I
a,
have a question. Oh, go ahead, Roy. I'll go after you.
Um, in that regard, overall for the city, Chris, do you have an estimate as to how many residents put their garden green waste in a green container? I live in a community that's single family homes, and our gardeners take up it away, I think, from every house here. So it makes sense to me to encourage people to use the new containers for their garden waste to make sure it goes to the right place. But that would be a real big educational project as well.
Yeah, it would. You're right. That area, a lot of these places just have gardeners that are taking care of that stuff. So we're going to need to take a look at every place. But I can tell you right now that we have currently 5,000 customers using the 96-gallon container on a weekly basis, and their gardeners are using that. And we're just asking exactly what Patrick said, which was just placing the food waste on top.
And that's a good number of people using those containers.
Yes. it
I
is.
say we need an awful lot of those people to switch to desert and stop generating so much green waste.
Exactly. Yes. Make the whole world a lot easier. So, Jake, what was your question? You froze on us.
And so I guess a question that I have, oh my, did I freeze?
You're
Am I still there?
unfrozen.
I'm gonna turn my video off. Okay. So my question is, I know that the pails seem potentially logical for for the multifamily buildings, except that it seems like it would be really labor intensive. And I'm curious why we still wouldn't have them consolidate in one large bin. It just would be one big large bin food waste, not waste. And is that under consideration, just to cut down on the labor required?
It is. That's one of the other options, right? That's another example. Your apartment buildings with centralized location bins, right? The pails, that's not going to really work there. If people want under sink pails, they can use those. But actually, yes, for complexes like the ones you're talking about, where they have centralized locations, we are suggesting a centralized location for either their green waste and food waste, or smaller source separated containers if they have some spaces.
Okay, any other questions about 1383 organics collection? We're just trying to wait until we have a little more certainty around our scope and services to start rolling this out in more communication to folks. And the big question is when does it start, right? So we want to make sure that we're well timed with regard to starting and all that kind of stuff. So. All right. And I confess something is going on with my computer that I cannot seem to unshare my agenda. So we'll continue to look at the agenda. So the next thing on our list was park trash can and recycling container efforts. So as I was mentioning, I was talking to Tracy about this, our primary contact that we were working on kind of looking at the parks and trying to make sure that all the parks had sufficient recycling and trash containers, and that they were placed in the right place, and that they looked correct. Our primary contact with that has been out for about 2 months now. So we haven't had a lot of progress in that area, unfortunately, because they have been out. So, and unfortunately, maintenance otherwise is fairly short staffed. So we haven't really made a lot of progress in that area. I will mention the downtown containers that we've been working on. So as you all probably know, we got some new trash and recycling containers downtown back at the end of, I think it was end of 2019, early 2020. And we were trying to put some signage on them to encourage better recycling behavior. We did a little test and our signage was not that effective. So we were trying to create some new stickers. So we're still in the process of doing that and trying to make sure that people understand that they should not put their cups into the recycling bin. So that's the primary culprit that we're dealing with on the public front. So again, we're still working on the stickers for that. And so we hope to have that ready to try out here in the near future. So organics and recycling compliance and changing requirements. So even though 1383 is a new ordinance, there are existing recycling and organics management requirements for commercial businesses that have been in place for a long time. And it has been a challenge to get them to comply with those existing requirements. We did a lot of outreach. We did some in-person visits to several non-compliant facilities and tried to get on their radar in terms of getting service. So we did some visits. We got some fairly good results, I think, as a result of those visits. Tracy's continued to make phone calls to businesses that are still out of compliance so that we can try to get them on, get them subscribed to services sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, you know, the story is going to change next year as the threshold limit goes down. So more people may be in the mix and more people may have to comply that are currently exempt. So anyway, so we're still working through that. We'll continue to do that through the end of the year. But again, the 1383 messaging is going to start to take precedence over that as we go through the end of the year here. So anyway, so that's still ongoing. And I don't know if we've done an assessment of kind of where we are compliance wise at the moment, but anyway, but we'll continue to monitor that. The other thing that was interesting in our meeting with my counterparts is that they seem to have had meetings with Cal Recycle, and we have not gotten contacted by Cal Recycle yet to have our meeting. So anyway, so something to look forward to. So we'll report out on that if we have it. So any questions on that front? All right. So the next thing was community composting. So I met yesterday, or I'm sorry, Tuesday, Tracy and I met with Haley Preston and some other folks from the Community Compost Coalition, as well as Grace Garner. We took a look at a site, a potential site out near the wastewater treatment plant and the animal shelter. And it is a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, than I thought it was. So we had a number of questions that arose during that discussion. And so we are coordinating with other staff on those questions and hope to get back to those folks next week about potential viability of that site. I think one of the challenges there is that the animal shelter uses a lot of that space to walk dogs. So there were lots of dogs walking by as we were there trying to do our thing. And some of those dogs are on the more aggressive side. So it was a little disconcerting. And so we'll see if what we can do. And then I did meet with Alberto, who's our building guy, and talked to him a little bit. And he actually had another idea of a location over in that area that might be a little more, a little easier for us to so again, I think this search continues. So I'll update folks on that front as we have more information. So it's my understanding that that group has a site that they're going to start working at, I think out in Palm Desert at the UCR campus. So it sounds like they may get to start something in the near future. So This is so weird. My computer continues to do weird things. All right. And then outreach. So my only update, I think, on the outreach front is Tracy and I are continuing to work on that letter to all residents. And Chris, we should probably start to talk about letters to residents or messaging to residents here shortly, just to start to get that word out there. The other thing is that the other Valley cities are, I think, going into an MOU through CVAG to promote some broader messaging around organic waste and prevention of organic waste, and putting things in the right bin, that kind of thing. So it sounded to me like that is moving forward. So there might be some general valley-wide information going out, just to start to get people thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That's a
Yeah.
great tool to use.
Yep. So we reviewed the scope and the cost breakdown, I think, last week. So I think that's moving forward. So, and then new business. So we do have a few events coming up, COVID willing. There is the Business Expo, September 22nd. That is on, that is actually it had always been billed as the Taste of Palm Springs. And so a lot of the local food vendors are there, and the casinos are there. And so I'm not sure what that will look like this year, given COVID, but we are in communication with the organizers of that to have a table, and we'll be passing out information. We also thought it would be a great opportunity to reach out to the food vendors. So we're going to create a package for them and go around and hand those out on foodware and also on food waste management. So anyways, we'll hopefully have all that together for them. And PSDS is going to be there too, right?
Yes.
So we'll all be there. Hopefully we'll get some good response, and we'll have some good attendance so that we can get the word out to a lot of folks. Then our next shredding and e-waste event is October 16th, and that's here at City Hall. And so we are looking forward to that, and we'll ask commission members to volunteer for that if they would like. And then the bulky item collection event will be the following weekend here also at City Hall. So we can keep those couple of events distinct. We'll see how that goes this year. It's our first time. I'm sure we'll have a lot of angry people at our first event saying, where is the bulky item collection? So anyway, so we're trying to, I've started to get the message out about it already. The front desk has been very good about telling people that they're on 2 different dates. So we'll see how that goes, right?
Done the
Yeah,
same
same
here.
here. Same
Operator, our
Yeah,
clerks, everybody.
yeah.
So what'll be in the newsletter? We're working on the newsletter right now. We'll make sure we share that with you, but it'll have these dates in there,
Great.
as well as some of that 1383 stuff, our consolidation of routes and routes changing, the whole green waste thing, because there's going to be a
Right.
lot. So we might as well just start
Yeah.
quickly.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
And you'll be conveying that at the 1PS membership meeting?
Yeah, so I'll continue to update to those folks too about what we're doing and where we're at in the process, and need to make sure that they're included. I'll also make sure to announce that meeting of HOAs and multifamily, because I know that there are a lot of them that participate in that too. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right, and that is next Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you send me materials, I'll have them on my computer. So if you're having trouble getting them to share screen on yours, I can do it.
Great. We will do that. Okay. All right. Okay, anything else?
I should have asked this earlier, just a clarification. The community composting, was that an event or is that an organization?
It's an organization. it's an organization and an idea. So there is a community composting coalition that is organizing some activity around finding a space to do community composting.
Okay,
Once they identify a space, then there will be community composting. So it will be a thing that.
and that would be where some of our food waste would go.
Exactly. It would be an option for folks. So.
And they're trying to find a space somewhere in the city where we could drop stuff off.
Right, exactly. And so it's, they've been focusing on, we've been focusing on city-owned property because that we thought, silly us, that would be easier, right? So anyway, but so we've gone through a couple of different locations, and each of them has their unique challenges. But again, I think we're continuing to look through various places, and really part of what it comes down to is the proximity to water, because that's an important thing for them to have access to during that process. Shade is another one. So the site that we were at next to the animal shelter is pretty much free of any shade. So it was not ideal from that perspective. And
Behind Demuth Center was considered?
Yeah, we had talked to them about that earlier, and they were not interested in that space. And then a little bit later, Parks and Rec actually put a fence up around that area that was near the community garden. And so it, the access was sort of cut off. So, yeah. So we're continuing to work on that. And yeah. So any other questions? All right. Well, I think that's it then for today. A couple of things, just a little preview maybe for the commission meeting. We are working on some documentation for priorities. And of course, two of our big priorities lie with this committee. And those are the 1383 implementation and the foodware ordinance implementation. So those are going to be, I'm sure, big things for us as we talk through priorities and other sorts of things. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, if you have not heard, is that the state legislature has passed a law on truth in labeling for recyclable materials. And so basically they will be limiting the types of materials that can have the little chasing arrows symbol on it. So I have a feeling what that's going to mean is that you probably will stop seeing the chasing arrow symbols with like the plastics that are like a 7 and a 4 and a 3. So you'll probably see a lot more limited instances of those symbols on plastic in particular. I don't exactly know how this is going to play out from a local perspective, where local markets are different than maybe national markets or statewide markets. So it's going to be interesting to see how they apply this on a statewide basis. Also, because packaging is universal, right? So I'm sure that Coke is probably not going to produce a different bottle than they have elsewhere. So anyway, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of ripple effects it has on the industries, but also on our recycling program. So the idea behind it is to try to clear up some of the confusion around what can and can't be recycled. And so anyway, so I think that it'll be interesting to watch it play out. So, I think that was it. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk more again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Bye,
day, everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stop.